What's going on, everybody? Convicted Mindset fam. I have another special guest with me this week, a young man that I met, I believe it was last year, and had the opportunity to learn about Gabe and his brother and some of the fun projects that they're doing. And if anybody's out there looking for a young up and comer to watch and to see and to learn from, I definitely would suggest this young man. I'm super grateful that you've spent some time with us here, Gabe.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. And I'm super grateful we cross paths and that we're here today, and I'm excited to catch up and chat.
For sure, for sure. Tell the folks who don't know who you are. Tell them what makes you unique, my friend.
Yeah, so what I like to say is that I'm just a 20-year-old searching for truth through people's stories and journeys. And my mission is to empower young people to pursue what they're passionate about and to redefine success. Is something big that I feel like um, I need to use my voice, and I have a responsibility to use my voice to put out that message. And yeah, I'm a current college student as well, studying communications and leadership, and that's pretty much who I am.
How did you start to find your voice?
Mm. Um, that's a great question, and I think it stems back to when I was a kid. It was something that brought me joy and happiness was talking to people.
Mhm.
And the story I always tell is my dad, brother, and I used to go to this restaurant called the Boneyard when I was like 7 years old to watch football games. And we went there specifically because they played every NFL game. And being
Mhm.
being a Steelers fan in Cleveland wasn't a good thing, you know. Um, and so during commercials, I would walk up to each table and ask who they were cheering for and why. I knew they had an interesting story, like why are you in Cleveland cheering for the Chiefs? Why are you in Cleveland cheering for Seattle? And I had to know their story. And so looking back to my life and reflecting on the things I loved to do as a child was talking to people. And so now, flash forward 13 years, I'm doing the same thing just with people's stories and their purpose and mission.
That's that's amazing. How many podcasts do you have now in the books?
We're at 126, 127, and over 60 guests, I think now.
Good for you. Where can
Yeah.
people find you on social and where can they listen to the podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast is called The Bridge. You can find it on all platforms. And my socials are just Gabe.Beaver. And yeah.
I love it. So when you're interviewing these guests, is there my first question is there anything that has shaped your perspective that you can look back on and go, oh, this is interesting. This has maybe shifted how I think about this topic.
Mm. I think that as a podcast host, it's amazing to interview people because you learn so much, but it's also a chance for you to look in the mirror, and someone can share a story that you actually feel like you're going through, but you can't vocalize it or they explained it in a certain way. Um, so I don't know if I can pinpoint an exact episode, but I know something that big has come up, a reoccurring topic is like this idea of vulnerability and being a man in society. And something that I struggled with is like showing my true emotion as I'm struggling with like say things I was going through. And it just happened to be the right time that I connected with someone who kind of pulled back their layers and talked about vulnerable situations, being a man and like crying, something that doesn't get talked about. And in that moment I realized that, all right, like what I'm going through is normal, and like leaning on my close relationships and those people around me is a healthy way to cope and go through what I was going through.
And do you think oftentimes that some of this social media that we subscribe to causes us to put up a veneer?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the truth is, like, do I want to show that I'm struggling? Does anybody want to show that?
No.
I think everyone wants to put their best foot forward. But I think what I've noticed is that when you're real and authentic and true, that's when you attract real and authentic, true people around
Mm.
you. And I'd rather have, 10 of those people around me than 100 people who like me because I put this facade up and like me for not who I actually am deep down.
The old adage that you'd rather have people love you for who you are than for who you're not, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So when you're interviewing these folks, I'm curious, as it relates to your life, has it shaped what you want to do? I know you kind of started out on this journey, right? I want to interview people, I want to talk to people, right? And has it shaped where you want to go with life? And on top of that, has it broadened your mind to like perhaps anything is possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think an area that I really dove into was the breath work, meditation, mental well-being, like doing the cold plunges. And I recently went out to California for a conference, and I visited a friend who I met through like meditation, breath work, and I made the realization that, hey, like this is something that I want to get into for sure and
Mhm.
help people. So I know that journey is gonna begin. It has already begun with myself and going on my own healing journey. But I really want to. I know that I will get into the facilitation role with breath work and meditation, just because the people I've interviewed, and it really piqued my interest in that. And then to answer your second question, anything is possible. And I I think that was something that starting off I said, but I don't know if I truly believed in it. But
Mhm.
now as I've gone through it and realized my identity, my faith, um, and trust, I know that I can, like with God on my side, like we can do anything, and I'm
Yeah.
confident of that.
I love that. And it's interesting. We had some friends over after church today, and we were talking about how, I'm not a fan when people say, "Oh, you're a motivational speaker,"
Mm,
because I'm not a big fan of motivation, like the raw moments. I feel that a vast majority of life changes really come from beliefs,
absolutely.
right? And so you and I can have all the motivational quotes on the mirror that we'd ever have, but doesn't really force change, right? It's a true belief system. And so it's interesting when you talked about that, like with God on your side, people will say nothing happens, you know, that isn't for me. There's always versions of that, right?
Mm,
And I always like to pose the question back, okay, well, if that's the case, then if you came home, and your house burned down and your wife and children were inside of it, walk me through how that was for you.
mm,
Because none of the motivational quotes in the world will save you in that spot, but the belief system, right? The belief in God, the belief in that there is a higher power or purpose could save you in that situation. So as you've interviewed these 60 guests, and I'm going to come back to your breath work, but as you've interviewed these 60 guests, have you thought about your belief system? And as you've crafted that belief system going through this journey that you're on, has that been difficult? Talk to the people that are listening to this that are maybe starting a business, maybe starting a podcast, and might lose a handful of friends that don't believe in the same things that they do or the things that they're saying, right? Or
mm.
maybe even the destination they're going. And that's uncomfortable, right, Gabe?
Yeah.
Tough to lose people because they don't believe the same thing you do. How did you deal with that?
I want to bring up one quick thing before I answer that question. Like you were mentioning about, you know, the motivational quotes, this and that. Everything's all good until life punches you in the mouth, right? Um, you're on top of the world, whatever. You think that you have it quote unquote figured out. And this past March, I think it was, I got punched in the mouth hard. Um, and I was struggling. I was like anxious and nervous all the time. Like being at school. And then my mom starts going through these like tests to see what's going on with her, and she's struggling. And we find out that she's got a cancer in her brain and that she's going to need to start chemo. And that was like my breaking point, and I'd hit a low that I'd never hit before. And like we mentioned, like, you can think that your faith is strong. You can think that, all these motivational quotes, but it's like when you truly get hit, it's not a time to like say this, oh, it's going to be all right,
No,
motivation thing,
no,
and it's
man.
dark and it's dark. There's a lot of pain and suffering. And in those moments, I thought the answer was just like running away from it, right?
Mhm.
Just bottling it up and just trying to deal with it on my own. And that was the wrong way to do it. And that's when I was still interviewing people, and I realized I was looking at the mirror when I'd interview someone and
Mm.
they'd talk about their struggle and suffering. And I realized that, hey, I need to talk about this. Hey, I need to rely on my close people around me to help me get through this. And I came out of that situation a hell of a lot stronger than I was going into it, you know? And it's something that that we're still going through, but my faith in God has become stronger because of those like situations. So that was something that was on my heart to share, and I usually don't share it, but I'm trying to become more comfortable with like sharing my story and what's actually going on. So,
I think there's a lot of people going through a lot right now, right? Like, I think if we were to treat 80% of the people that we meet as though they've just gone through some major life event, we'd probably be right.
mm,
Like, I think that there's a lot of suffering, and maybe it's social media, maybe it's the climate. I don't have the answer, but I think like there's a lot of suffering and silence going on right now. You seeing anything like that with your world, your circle of influence, your podcast?
uh, I think I see it in my world, especially with mental health, and then with the pharmaceutical and how our society handles things like that. Um, I think it's sad, and it's something that I'm working towards, you know, having more. I'm not saying don't like take your medicines that are prescribed and
Right.
stuff, but I think there's a lot of other things that one can do as well as, if not, to quote unquote like find themselves and not be anxious or things like that. So,
And that's something I want to dive into. I think not only the adversity component of people who are watching this, but also like, okay, now that we've identified it, like what are we actually doing about it? Right. And so I think I get to watch you every day go through your cold plunge. And it's like, dude, at the end of the day, like you said, when you learned about your mom's diagnosis, nobody's going to do those push-ups for you. Nobody's going to go through that hard work for mom.
mm,
All the cute books in the world, right? Still tough, still sad.
yep.
And so I see your journey each day, and it's like no one's going to jump in that barrel for you. So tell the folks listening, like who don't even know what cold plunge is, like let's start at that level, right? And then walk them through your why with the cold plunge. I can sell you on it. I love it. I've got one in the garage. I love it. Like, um, but tell us about your experience, especially as it relates to mental health. Like, I think that's a
Mm,
topic that I really want to focus on as men in the world that we've gone through, COVID pandemic, and now post pandemic in this world that's really uncomfortable. So much tension on the news, so much tension in the workplace, so much tension in restaurants, right? Like
yeah.
it's just like a world full of tension. It's kind of spooky. And so you've in my opinion, correct me, you've kind of found this little niche in the backyard that's taken you to a mental place every day of positivity.
Yeah.
Talk to
Yeah.
me.
So I started um I started like messing around with the cold a couple years ago, doing like hot cold showers. I saw somebody doing it. I did it a few times and stopped doing it. And then right before the pandemic hit, I watched like a Wim Hof, and he's the quote unquote Iceman. If you don't
Mhm.
know him, definitely search him. And I saw this guy had a spirit and this no fear mentality that I was like, what he's doing, I'm in for that. I want to start doing that.
Yeah.
So I started doing his breath work. I started doing the cold showers. And about a year and a half, I bought this little blue tub off of Amazon that was $40. The instructions were in Korean. And I put it in my backyard and I started putting ice in it and doing plunges. And
Whole body.
yeah, I'll dunk my head in and then put my full body into it. And I I do it probably 3 to 5 times a week. And yes, there are the physical benefits that we all know, dopamine, epinephrine, like even your skin, it's good for it. But I go in because it's a situation that is an outside stressor. Whenever you go into the cold, your heart rate wants to shoot up. Your body says, "Get me out of here," right? Yes, with practice, you become better at it, but it's still every time you go in,
It
it's
sucks.
cold. Yeah. And I really just dial in on my breath.
Yeah.
And the breath is something that I was born with, and it's something that will happen on the last day. I take my last breath. And it's something that not a lot of people talk about. And when you learn how to control your breath, you control your heart rate, you control your response to stress. And that's something that I realized is that stressful situations before probably would have gotten me more worked up. But now it's like I can control my heart rate, I control my breath, and it's like I'm gonna relax my shoulders, I'm gonna unclench my jaws, and I'm gonna approach this whatever situation with this mindset that I will get through this. And that's what I do.
I love it. I love that, man. I get to watch that. It's been fun. And so, as you've been on this journey, have you found your what some people would call your authentic tribe? Have you found people who are like, man, Gabe, the more you tell your story and the more it's uncomfortable for you, the more I'm drawn to you. Have you found that yet?
Yeah. It's, even the people around me, which is funny, some of my closest friends, they started doing the cold plunges and now they text me like, "Hey Gabe, can I come over?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." Um, but even I went to a conference a couple weekends ago in Los Angeles, never been out there. I went alone and I was like, I'm gonna do this. And I met so many genuine, authentic people that I created a relationship with that was probably deeper than some of the closest friends I had back at home. And it was because I was my most authentic self and they were their most authentic self. And that's what, when you approach and have these conversations revolving around your authentic self, and you're vulnerable, like truly, um,
Yeah.
you create a bond that is like no other. So I met people for the first time on a Saturday Sunday conference that it's like we stayed up till 4:30 in the morning just sitting around talking. And so I definitely have seen my tribe and the people around me. And then even the people I stayed with the week after, were people I interviewed on the podcast. They invited me to sleep at their house, live there for a week, and we bonded over the commonality of breath work and meditation. And so we did cold plunges together. We dove deep. My buddy ran a 30-mile. He did a 30-mile run, and he invited me to do the last 12 with him. I wasn't gonna do the full 30, but I did the last 12 with him, and it's those people that I know I'm in the right place.
And that's so rad. So I love that, bro. I love it. I think what's interesting, my wife and I were out last night,
Mm-hmm.
2 nights ago, sorry, Friday night, with some friends of ours. And one of them, kind of knew my story, but didn't know the whole story. And so as we were at the table and I shared the whole thing kind of start to finish with them, I'm tired of talking about it, right? Like it's to me,
Mm.
it's 14 years old and you can Google it. But what was interesting is the individual that was there, he was like, when you share this with me, it makes me feel like I can tell you anything. And I thought, bro, like that's what the world is supposed to be about, especially if guys like us who have a component of faith, we're supposed to bear one another's burdens, are we not? Right. And so I found it to be interesting that oftentimes social media and quote unquote religion will put people into a box. And I think there's this line, if you could draw it down the middle, stay with me. If you were to say all these societal or cultural beliefs, um, Gabe is good looking, Gabe has money, Gabe drives a nice car, et cetera. Gabe has a good job. Gabe would be favored of God. But if Gabe is going through this adversity or that trial or struggling here, he may not be doing something right. Be curious your perspective on that.
The first thing that came to my mind was the story in the Bible where the woman who has basically nothing gives her 2 coins, like when she only
Oh
has two
my,
coins
yeah.
and she gives that. And that's something I think about a lot is at this age that I'm at, everything is all about okay, this job I'm gonna get, the money I'm gonna make.
Mhm.
I For my leadership program, I had to facilitate a conversation. My icebreaker was if money wasn't a thing, what would be your dream job or something like that. And every single person mentioned something about money.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like it was about money, and our society puts this thing that if you don't have money, you won't be successful. And
Mhm.
I've seen people who have all the money in the world and they're unhappy, they're depressed.
Mhm.
And I know in my heart that I'm already rich in spirit. And so whatever happens, happens. And
Mhm.
I know that I'm going to be blessed because it's going to allow me to shop for the right things for other people. And the fact that I know now where I don't have that much, but I know at whatever capacity I can give, I will give.
Mhm.
And I know that at the end, that's all that matters. And I don't think we're not meant to walk through this life thinking that we have it all figured out or we have the money, the car. We're meant to chase God-sized dreams and go after things like that. And if we land flat on our face 10 times, we're going to come back to 11th. Um, like I wasn't created to have these small dreams, like that wouldn't glorify God in his name. So
When you hide your story, you hide God's glory.
yeah.
So talk about some of your God-sized dreams. What do you got on the whiteboard? What do you got in your head?
Yeah. So I've had my first book written for like the past year now. So that's gonna be one of the first things I get out. Continue the podcast. I think after this first book, I'm gonna do a poetry book. I definitely love doing that. And then also getting more into speaking. I spoke at TED and that was awesome. I had a blast. And it was one of those things where backstage afterward, everybody was like, "Oh man, I'm so glad that's over." Like
Yeah.
I was sitting there, I want to do it again,
Yeah.
I'm ready. Um, so definitely get more into speaking. And then also the breath work. I want to get certified and I'm definitely going to start holding space to facilitate things like that. And I also want to get in this role of mentorship for younger people, to be someone that they can say, hey, like, look at Gabe did this and that. I know that I'm capable of doing what I want to do. So definitely mentoring kids is something that is on the list. And then charity and giving back.
Good.
Um, I know that that's something right now that I'm working on. We're thinking about, me and my buddy, climbing a mountain and doing
Uh-huh.
some charity work. That would be fun.
That would be rad.
Yeah, and then also incorporating the podcast with some
Yeah.
charity work as well.
Yeah.
So
I love it, man. I love it. Well, since this has been recorded, I'm gonna have to check in with you in a few months and see how we're coming on your dreams.
absolutely, that's what I love about. We have documentation of everything. So
Right. Right. Tell everybody where they can find you again.
social media, just Gabe.Beaver on Instagram, all that good stuff, and then the Bridge podcast.
Beautiful, man. Hopefully, there is a number of folks out there who may be struggling, maybe just trying to find themselves and are looking for somebody who might just be a couple steps in the sand ahead of them, that hopefully they reach out and see your journey and can make some epic connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say this. It's always on my heart at the end of podcasts to say, you're worthy, you're loved, and you're enough. Um, no matter what anybody says, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know where you are in the world, but you are worthy, loved, and enough. And at any capacity, if I can be of service, reach out. I reply to everything, and yeah.
Right on, brother. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having me on, Travis. Uh, it's cool, full circle
Yeah,
moments, and I know we'll cross paths and be doing epic stuff. So
I look forward to it, man. Have a good evening.
you too.
Later, brother.